Okay, cool. Check. All right. How you guys doing today? You guys having fun at the first Philly B-Sides or what? Yeah, I got to start it out. I can't tell you how excited I am to be presenting at the first ever Philly B-Sides. I started my career here in Philly, both in IT and security, so to be a part of an event like this is really pretty awesome. Obviously, I'm pandering to my Philly crowd here. I haven't followed the roster for a long time, but I go back to like Curse and Westbrook and all those guys, so a little bit ago. So who the hell am I? Well, my name's Danny Akacki, and at Akacki on Twitter. Also important to note that I didn't write this alone. I wrote it with Jackie Stokes and Stephen Hink. You guys can find them respectively at Find Evil and Stephen Hink. What do? I hunt stuff. I've hunted stuff at a bunch of different places. Right now I work for a company who either doesn't want to be named or doesn't want to be associated with me, so I don't put it in. I don't blame them, any club that I'm a member of. Worked at Mandiant actually a couple times, and GE for a little bit down in New Orleans. I've got a long, sordid love affair with Philly. Like I said, started my career here, both IT and security. Proposed to a girl on the art museum steps. She said no. So, and enthusiastic, awkward hugger, as you can see in there too. So I can also show you on the PA Turnpike where I tossed the ring off the bridge. So there's that. But I love this city, and I'm really happy to be here to talk about hunting. So let's get to it. What's the problem set? We want to find evil, or we want to find ways for evil to do evil things, right? It's not all about sexy APT, Russia, China, whatever. Hunting's about a lot more than that, and it's about ways that your environment's going to be vulnerable in ways that you really even haven't thought of or aren't paying attention to. And the end goal of all this is to build a program and mature it, where it can complement your capabilities of monitoring and detection. So it's not just a one-off thing. This has to be a constant feedback loop, right? And it's something that never stops, but it has to feed into all other aspects of your security program. So, what have we done so far, and what are we trying to do now? So pretty much what we've done so far that I've noticed, when I was at Mandiant, as a consultant, see a lot of different environments, and it's been just kind of trying to throw a tool at the problem, right? And that's not going to work anymore. It hasn't worked for a long time. The central theme really has to be people, process, and technology, with the emphasis on people, with the emphasis on the hands behind the keyboard, because, and inevitably, your tools are going to fall down. Your tool of choice will fall down at some point, and you're going to have to pivot to something else. Even me, I've fully admitted, I've been heavily dependent on a single tool when I was at Mandiant. It's their product called a threat analytics platform. And now that I'm not there, I have to pivot to something else. So this is really what it's all about. It's not tools. It's definitely not alerts. Alerts are important, and alerts are an important part of triage. And it's not necessarily about the automation, although it's a set of methodologies that's going to bleed into all three of those. And for analyzing large data sets in search of incidents, and to add context to your future detections, right? So you can go back, look at your after action, look at your lessons learned, and feed it in that way. This whole presentation is going to be a B and C of, hey, how do I hunt? How do I do A, B, C, and D? It's really going to be a lot more spread out than that. And this is to build a use case to when thinking about spinning up your programs and your processes. Hunting as a methodology. So what exactly do I mean when I talk about methodologies, right? It's not a linear process. It's more, think of it as like a Rorschach painting, as opposed to, whoever paints stuff with straight lines. I'm not an art historian, sue me. It's really about being able to pivot through a lot of different data sets and through a lot of different points. It's also going to be iterative. So you're going to have to go through the same process again and again, improving each and every time. It's also going to be a hypothesis driven, right? So you have to start with an idea. Whether that's something like, I want to look for, large outbound data transfers, right? You have to start with at least a kernel of an idea. And what we kind of centered this presentation on was, disproving something. Like your hypothesis can be, I know that all of my controls are solid. I know I don't have any wonky protocols on my network. All right, well now go and prove that, because I guarantee you're going to find something. I can't tell you how many times through our engagements we found IRC running on corporate networks or RDP coming out of a domain controller. Like, it happens, and it's there. And no matter how much the clients are going to tell you that, no, man, we're good. It doesn't happen. And you got to think about layering. Your hunt methodology is just another layer to your overall detection strategy. And it's going to be outside of the pre-existing definitions, or it's going to be outside your normal signatures and that kind of thing. So this is one of the kind of the best TLDRs of hunting that I've seen. This comes from Squirrel. Show of hands, people familiar with Squirrel? There you go. A few of you. If you aren't, I highly recommend going out to the Squirrel blog. They're doing some really great things on hunting, analytics, machine learning. That's stuff still over my head, but they've got a great blog, so I definitely recommend going to that. So you start with your hypothesis, right? You want to attempt to debunk your assumptions about your environment, which I'm going to go over a lot later in the presentation. So you start with an idea. You start with, just really anything. And if you're a small org, you can think a little bit smaller. I want to look at, like I said, bad protocols going across your network, shitty controls. I think my proxy is configured properly, right? I'm going to see true destination on everything. And then you really go look at the logs, and all you see is like, hey, maybe my sensors aren't really placed in the right place, because I see true destination. I don't see true source. So that's something that's going to be revealed through this. And then from there, you have to go through your tools and your analysis techniques, right, to attack the problem set, because you want to validate what you think is or isn't happening on your network. And from there, you're going to uncover new patterns and new tactics that weren't initially covered by what you already had for your automation detection strategy. And from there, we're going to use that to inform and enrich your process, and you're going to start all over again, right? This entire loop is useless if you don't have the end game of putting it back into your processes that you already have. So we need some certain things to build a foundation. By the way, if you see the Harry Potter theme, that was Jackie's idea. So that's going to be kind of going through the presentation. More pyramids. Anybody familiar with David Bianco? 1, 2, 3. Okay, cool. Again, if you're really interested in hunt processes, hunt methodology, look up David Bianco and read everything he's ever written. He started with this thing called the Pyramid of Pain, and we kind of bit off of that style a little bit. So from here, we start at the very bottom of what the foundations are, right? If you're going to be building a mature, robust hunt capability, you have to work your way all the way up this pyramid. Now, this isn't to say that you can't be hunt capable, because you can do hunting with just the minimum amount of budget and people. You can do it with one guy and like an elk stack setup. But if you're going to want to have this matured, you're going to want to try to go up to this pyramid. So first we start with a formalized security program, right? Most important here, you're going to need a sponsor, right? You're going to need somebody in leadership that buys into what you're doing. And you're going to have to explain it to them, because it's not their job to know what you do, but it is your job to explain it to them. Why is this important? What's our end game? How is this going to protect us? Moving up the pyramid, a SOC and a CERT, right? You're going to have some kind of formalized process, or at least hopefully some kind of group that's eyes on glass. You're going to want to have analysts in the seats, and hopefully some kind of process for if you do have an incident, and some method to go through your IR. And from there, you'll see right on the third thing, you kind of must be this tall to ride when it comes to building a hunt capability, right? You're going to want all of these things pretty solidly in your favor before you can even think about doing any kind of proactive hunting. Which is, your technology and tools. You're going to have your stack in place, because, grepping through 20 terabytes of logs doesn't manage. We've done it, and it sucks. And, it's not conducive, so you're going to want to have your technology stack, set up before you get to this point. Use cases and playbooks, right? All of this is useless if you don't build new playbooks, new use cases. You want to be able to sit a junior analyst down, and I remember back when I first started all this, or I worked for David Bianco, and he taught me pretty much everything I know. And the prevailing thought was, it doesn't matter how you get there, just that everybody got to the same thing. And that's totally not the case. It shouldn't have been the case then. It's not the case now. You want to be able to at least build these in such a way where you can sit any junior analyst down and say, hey, here's how you can start, and get their brains thinking about it. There's another guy, Chris Sanders. Look him up, Chris Sanders 88 on Twitter. He does a lot of work, not only with hunting and security and all that, but he's also doing like his PhD in psychology and applying it to all this. So that goes into it as well. And so now we mature. We have a hunt program where we have those capabilities, where you can improve things like governance, overall detection. And again, you can do, let me see if I can get over here. Is that not coming through? Yeah, cool. So you can be like right around here and be hunt capable, right? You can stand up elk, you can stand up security onion, put sensors out, and you can have one dude in charge of it, and at least you've started something. So it's not like, oh, I need all this or else I'm useless. No, it's not that at all, which I'll cover that later on as well. So too long didn't read. Tools, information, and somebody who's going to care and be able to bankroll you for all the stuff that you're going to want to do. So another really handy thing from Squirrel is a hunting maturity model to kind of give you guys a baseline of where a lot of companies are right now. So as they see it, and I happen to agree with a lot of this, is, you know, most orgs right now, they're at about a 1. You start at a 0. You have a sim, and that's cool when you have alerts coming through from some random intel service that you have, and that's all right. And then you move up to maybe getting your own intel. Putting it back through, you know, talking to your IR teams, your red teams, and putting that information back into your own hunt programs. Moving up 2, 3, and 4, there's really not a lot of orgs that are even past 1 or 2 just now. From people I've talked to in the industry, you're going to look at the guys like Target and like the GEs of the world. They're the guys that are really killing it on this. So this is just kind of like a level set about if you want to establish where you think your hunt capability might be. So building a hunt program. So where do we start? Where are we going, and what's it actually going to take to get there? At a minimum, we have to iterate through a few projects before you actually get to the point where you can hunt. I mean, it's going to be a lot of trial and error, and you're going to be able to, but in that process, you're going to be able to find the gaps. Some of these will be easier than others based on the resources that you have available to you. Hopefully you have that executive buy-in. Establish and implement an enterprise logging strategy, right? So it's going to be, what devices do we have? Do we even know what we have? When's the last time we talked to NetOps? When's the last time we updated our network diagram? These are all things that you're going to have to take into consideration if you're going to want to move to the next level. What do other departments have? I worked in places that have such a large Splunk instance that you have multiple search heads. And by the time I left the place, I still didn't know who had what search head and what data I could get from them. So communication is key, right? You can't operate hunting in a bubble. You're going to need to talk to your other departments. Considering things like logging levels, right? Not everything logs equally, and some devices have security settings that aren't even turned on to log, or maybe they're not at the proper levels. You can talk about PowerShell, right? Like, who knows that all of their Windows boxes have the most recent version of PowerShell turned on that have more features than the lower versions. That's stuff you have to kind of take into consideration. And then from there, you have all your data. You have to have a centralized place to aggregate it and process it. I mentioned Splunk earlier, Elk Stack, Mandiant, we had TAP. And then it has to get normalized, right? Because you're going to have a lot of disparate log sources coming through that might not jive with each other, right? Like you might have a few different, Cisco devices, ASAs and routers and such that are going to maybe call certain fields certain ways. I remember back in my first time at Mandiant, you had stuff coming from ArcSight, and this was in the very infancy of TAP, right, where we were still building the parsing on our own, and just a few different spaces broke the parsing. And nothing was coming out, and you couldn't pivot on anything. So that's something you got to take into consideration. And then none of this does you any good if you can't search it fast. Anybody use Splunk a lot? Show of hands. All right, a few people. So you probably know you've done searches that you can spin up, and go to lunch for an hour and a half, and they still won't be done by the time you get back. And then you get an email from your Splunk admins cursing your name. So, you know, it's not convenient to have to regex and grep transforms manually, when you can have a tool that can manage that for you. I really put too many notes on my slides. So from here, this all drives your maturity, right? Being able to develop those use cases, determining if you're actually getting the right data, and then going through your tool sets, right? You might say, hey, we don't have anything that can do what we need it to do, and you're going to find that out as you go through this process. And then you can reintegrate that into your hunting mission. And then from this, the most important thing you're going to get from this is metrics, right? Because at a certain point, you have to answer to somebody, and somebody's going to be like, hey, why are you concentrating on this when you could have been doing this? And the sad thing is you're going to have to go to them and say, hey, everything is working great. We have 300% more incidents, and they're going to look at you like you're an idiot. But that's a good thing, because you're going to find more things, but your time to detect is going to go down. So that's going to be a really important part of that. It's going to be a total team effort, right? You're going to have to communicate with your IR team, your SOC, and your CERT, and it's not always, there's politics involved, right? So you're going to have to navigate that, but communication is really, really key. And so just to kind of visualize how this process should go, when you're hunting, you're going to find really kind of one of two forms of data. Either it's going to be, well, actually three. It's going to be nothing at all. It's going to be your run-of-the-mill stuff. Or it's going to be evil. You know, you're going to say, hey, this is really wonky. We have to escalate this to IR. Or it's going to be not evil, but it's going to be visibly a risk, right? So one of in the engagements that I've done, one of the biggest risks that we had is out-of-date software, right? So you have 75 different versions of Firefox going, but nobody's looking at that. Like, their patch management just isn't there. But through the engagement, we were able to show the client that. And when we showed it to him, he just said, hey, we have a business to run. We can't worry about Firefox. I said, okay, let me try to come up with a better way to explain this to you, because that's a huge attack surface. And then from there, you know, your IR, you can feed your hunt, feed your IR, and vice versa, right? So when I was at GE, we worked shoulder to shoulder with IR. If they were going through an active incident, they would ask us to help scope it. Like, hey, we saw these boxes were popped. Go through Splunk, see if you can scope this otherwise. Or if we were working something, it's like, hey, have you guys seen this yet? And they were literally the aisle over, and that was awesome, but that's not always the case. But it definitely helps. And then this has to, and the IR outcomes will affect your security operations, who should be updating your lessons learned, your use cases. They should be an active part of the process, all with the intention of upping your detection capabilities. So use cases, I've talked a lot about them so far. They are scenarios to help you uncover your problems and guide your thinking, right? So having a set playbook, a set amount of use cases, and how are we going to construct them, right? So here's the goal. I need to fulfill the goal, and who's going to care about this and why? What has to be there for that detection to occur? Is it a rule in SIM? Is it kind of, a choose your own adventure for your analysts where they can go through their own mental steps to get through the process? It doesn't have to be complex. A use case doesn't have to be a 75-page PDF that's notarized by 4 different people. It could be something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet, right? But it's important that these things start getting written down. It doesn't really matter how you got there, that you got there. No, that doesn't really jam anymore. But the eventual goal is, with each use case, to get it further away from the human, where you have it automated enough so that you can work on something new and then do it all over again. And then, so these are going to contain your internal tactics, techniques, and procedures, your tools and your logic and your data. What are the events of interest that are going to prove or disprove your use case? And just kind of expanding on the use cases again. That use case is kind of a wrapper, right? And then from there, you're going to look for your events of interest that can prove or disprove it. And then if you find it, it's going to turn into an incident. So to kind of outline, we didn't used to have these slides in this presentation, but we got a lot of questions on what exactly is a use case, how do you construct it, right? So here's a little example of it. what we did a lot at Mandiant is we would base our use cases off of one of the different kill chains, whether it's the MITRE model, the Lockheed model, but it helps to kind of have something to build around it. And so say you want to do a use case around, establishing footholds, completing their mission, DataX, all that kind of thing, and then you can stage it through each of these separate ones and say, okay, if I want to look for the initial compromise, what am I going to need to see? I'm going to need to see beaconing, malware installation, C2 servers, that kind of thing. So it's really centered around the behaviors from the threat actors as they try to complete their mission in this example. We can drill down a little further into that and see, okay, what do we need to make this happen? So if I want to detect an initial compromise, and by the way, the AOI is activities of interest. That's just another piece of terminology that they use. So you can do this by doing a design tree and tools that can help you identify where your gaps exist. If I want to detect this and I want to detect, beaconing and tools in C2, okay, do I have NetFlow? Because not everybody has full PCAP for 6 months, and NetFlow can be very, very valuable. Do you have AV logs even coming in? How's your SIM configured? And all those different kinds of things to help build those individual use cases. So for the outcomes, what do we think that we want to accomplish here? And what are you going to have to tell your management when you sit down in your meetings, right? The most important thing, and I really want you to remember this, there is no such thing as a failed hunt, right? Nothing is still something. It's not about swinging for the fences. I mentioned that earlier. A lot of people want the sexiest thing possible so that they can justify their existence, but it's not always about that. So if you go to the no detection, it's either, hey, you're clean, or you're just not being effective enough. So you have to seek to prove or disprove that. And if it's non-malicious, you're looking at things like policy violations, out-of-date software, compliance issues. I can't tell you how many times I just saw, gigs and gigs of data going out or coming in of people just downloading movies onto servers. Like, it happens. It sounds stupid and it shouldn't happen, but it has been there. Two, hopefully, not hopefully, but if you find something malicious, then that's where your use cases and your playbooks and your communication with your other departments will come in. So those are pretty much the outcomes that you're going to hope to accomplish with this. So now that you've got your data in your lake or your reservoir or cluster of puppies, whatever you want to call it, how do we collect and process and analyze it? So this is kind of a visualization to tell you all the different places that your data can hide and all different kinds that maybe you might not have even thought of to kind of get what you need. But just as like not enough is a problem, too much is also a problem. You need the right data. So you can get things like from security, like your web proxy IDS, network. So the first three here, security, endpoint, and network, those are kind of the most popular ones, right? Those are where a lot of us always go to. And we tend not to think about data sources from IT, but that's really kind of where it should start, right? Because you need to focus your energy somewhere, because you're just going to start going down after rabbit hole after rabbit hole. Like, what are your crown jewels? What are your critical assets? You're not going to know that, and the SOC might not even know that, but IT's going to know it. Your domain admins are probably going to know that. So that's definitely a very rich source of intel, all the way up to HR, right? We don't ever really think about that. Are you keeping track of your terminated users? Are you keeping track of what work hours that your employees should be doing? Like what if you see an admin who's usually on 9 to 5, and all of a sudden at 4 o'clock in the morning, you see them log in and then a bunch of data getting transferred. Hey, look, a RAR file. That's something you're going to want to look for. And then all the way up to, access logs for the building. Well, why is somebody coming in at, 1 o'clock in the morning when they usually don't come in till 6? That's definitely something that's, so these are all different types of, data sources that you could take into consideration. So when it comes to events, we've kind of categorized this into two types of events. Observed, events and synthetic events. What I mean by observed events is kind of data straight from the tap, right? Stuff that's going to come in directly from your firewalls, your proxies, your mail servers, and they directly process the data. There's nothing else being done to it. And so from here, you can kind of see an example of an observed event coming from Apache server with a bunch of the metadata in it. From there, this is a synthetic event created by the way, for a lot of this, we were using Bro. So this synthetic output came from Bro sensor. And that's just kind of Bro. People familiar with Bro in the room? Okay, cool. Same people raising their hands all the time. Awesome. But that's cool because I want to get a baseline of who kind of doesn't know what. So hopefully you guys learn something from this. So Bro sensor basically just sits at your egress points, sniffs your traffic and tries to categorize it, right? So you're going to see here, this synthetic event came in via Bro into the threat analytics platform. Again, I'm not shilling for them because I don't work for them anymore, but it was a pretty badass hunting platform. The metadata is really the most important thing because that's what you're going to be able to pivot on, right? So this is like their class analytics, as classifying it as data exfil, with, received bytes and sent bytes. So you can pivot off of that. Say, if you know that there's a certain class of malware out there or, exploit kit that comes in or goes out at a certain byte count, that stuff is really important. And if you can't get direct log sources, cause I have found it's not as easy as it sounds, right? You can't just call up any department and be like, hey, can you start feeding us logs from, your email server? Cause it's going to take 6, 9, 8 months depending on the kind of red tape you have to go through. So sometimes, I've seen places that just kind of not stood up their own shadow IT, but like, hey, Bro's free and hey, we need a VM. Can we have it for a while? Oh yeah, no problem. We'll own that. And then that's kind of how you get at least some kind of, hunt capability going. So what's the right data, right? It's going to be the original data whenever possible. You want it straight out of the tap because it's going to come with less processing, less manipulation, and it's going to be closer to your source truth. Proxy and firewall data obviously going to contain different things, but they're going to complement each other. And so you have to review to make sure you're getting what you need. Is the parsing working? Are you getting the right metadata out of it? And the most important thing to be able to have when you're hunting and getting this data in is to be able to pivot, right? I'll give you a quick example. You could do something as simple as like, you want to pivot off the destination IPv4, right? What did it do? Who did it talk to? Who else talked to it? When did it do the thing that I think I saw it do? And that way you can create that timeline, right? Because the timeline is one of the most important things about this. And then from there, you can pivot through, hey, I saw this come in via, a proxy log. Do I have a firewall log that's going to give me the original source? Does it have AV logs? Oh, look, it triggered an AV alert. Oh, it was cleaned, but it's doing this over and over and over again. So that's something you're going to want to be able to look at. And these are the kinds of things that you can start thinking about as you're hunting through your data. I hate when I do that. So you've got your plan, you've got your data, but, you're still not ready because you still have to learn your critical assets, develop that strategy, again, with trying to find out the different log levels, the timelining is important, and then again, I'm going to keep harping on the communication point because you're never going to think of everything. So account for other kind of use cases, right? So that it's also a way to kind of justify your existence because this is still relatively new. This whole, it is and it isn't, but in this form, hunting is still kind of a new endeavor. So in order to justify your time on it, how can you complement this with like your compliance people, your forensics guys, your IR guys? And that's really going to help your case. And then from there, you have to clean up your data set, normalize it, dedupe it, parse it. This is all work that has to go in to everything. How are we doing on time? Good. And all this is to enrich your data set. So your data and your events are utterly useless without context, right? So say, hey, yeah, we saw this, this malicious domain a year ago, but there's no other notes in it. Why do we think it's malicious? You get this a lot with a lot of the paid intel feeds, right? Norse used to do this. They would put like, oh, it's got a score of 85. We should block everything. Okay, why? It's got a score of 85. What more do you need to know? That's how it happens. So building context is really, really key. Anything from malware analysis, right? And that's kind of the more advanced part of it. Being able to pull out those domains, those C2 domains out of the malware. What kind of adjustments, that the malware might make to, reg keys and that kind of thing. Analytics, it's a sexy word. It's new. It's not perfect. It was promising. So the best intel you're ever going to get is going to be internal. You can pay for all the feeds in the world, and I'll tell you from experience, you're never going to get anything better than what you're getting from your other departments, right? One of the give and takes that I really stress is working with your red team. It's been for a long time. Red teams and blue teams, sometimes they don't get along all that well. Or red team, they want to hold their tricks tight to the vest. And I've seen blue teams that only concentrate on finding the red team. And you say, well, okay, that's fine. You found them, but that's not how a real attacker might come at you. They're not going to mimic a nation state. Oh yeah, but we found the red team. We're gold. That's not it. But it's important to build a good rapport with your red team. TTPs from your previous incidents. Baselining is huge, right? So even if you have to spend 1 or 2 months baselining your network, that's how you're going to find the normal or the abnormal from the normal. When you know what business as usual is. And then, of course, you have your external, your paid subscriptions, free feeds, passive DNS, geographical data for stuff. There's analytics called geolocation, right? Not particularly refined just yet, but if you can make it happen, if you see a login from some guy who's usually in India, and all of a sudden 2 minutes later he's coming from Palo Alto, that's kind of a big red flag. So, and then of course you have your ISACs, InfraGuards, all that kind of stuff. So your tools. What are we going to yield to actually get the job done? Your criteria for your working hunt platform. Something with a rapid search, preferably with an API or a GUI, because like I said, grepping in a terminal all day is just not going to manage it. Being able to stack it, right? So it might seem obvious to some of us, but if you have the ability to stack your data and then just sort it by what has happened the least, that's one of the easiest wins that you can get to find those outliers. And then you're going to want to pivot. You have to build context. You have to see the whole picture. I've worked with analysts who just said, hey, here's a Chinese IP and it's blasting all this, it's coming from China, or it's coming, just saw the RU address. Okay, cool. But they're real countries too. It's real data coming in. That's just not enough, right? You have to be able to move laterally and see that whole picture. And your nice to haves or being able to tag things, right? So what I recommend, I love Jira. Jira has been my jam for a long time, and what we used to do is do research on current families of malware, current exploit kits out in the wild, right? And then be able to tag them with what part of the kill chain we thought they were coming from. What are some of their what are some of the IOCs, like, hey, it drops this specific dropper with this MD5 at this, so that helps feed those signature based things. So they're still important. They're not the end all, but they're important. And then with the end goal of having that into the automation. Of course, it's all about the galleons, right? And for those not familiar with Harry Potter, it's money. We realize not everybody's a big Harry Potter fan. So yeah, it really is all about the budget, especially when you're going through, a big thing is, a vendor selection versus rolling your own. I've seen environments do both. And at a certain point, every vendor wants an agent. Every vendor wants to put an agent on your endpoints, and that's just not going to manage. So, you have to kind of determine what's acceptable use for you. And it's important to have multiple diverse tools, right? Can't rely on one thing, because like I said earlier, it's going to fall down, it's going to fail you, and you're going to have to pivot to something else. Most important thing on this slide, I think, is you can do this stuff with little to no budget. You've got things like NXLog, Moloch, Wireshark, Bro, Elk, Security Onion. Look that up if you've never played with it. Spin it up in a lab at work, spin it up at a lab at home, and you can do this stuff. You don't have to spend $8 billion doing that. And I can say that because I don't work for a vendor anymore. So you got the tech, you've got buy-in, you've got structure, and now you have to actually do the damn thing. So this is wall of text engage. I'm not going to go through all of this. I blame Jackie for this, so if you find her on Twitter, you can harass her for that. So these are just, a few of the sample things that we've actually done through our engagements, right? And it's ways to start thinking about how to apply this to your own environment, right? So some of the things I've highlighted here, large or extended outbound data transfers, VPN logins that are geographically infeasible, like I mentioned earlier, service credentials doing not service-related stuff, web proxies, tunneling, and endpoints not added to the network without visibility by security. It's amazing how often that happens. And I've actually found from being a consultant, I've worked mainly at the network level. So when I do get endpoint logs, it's gold. So I can actually build that context. I can go to a client all day long. Do we have any consultants in the room that do consulting work? One. Okay, cool. Well, then you might feel this pain too. So if you're going to be doing these engagements and only working at that network level, I can give them my best guess and my best professional opinion and just hope that they don't think it's the completely stupidest thing, because I can't see what their entire network looks like. And you have to, this is kind of the purpose of hunting and doing this over and over again, is to build your best guess to the best point possible. So yeah, your kernels here might be driven by, threat intel reports, vulnerability scans, or just, your company-wide trends. Knowing what your attack surface is for your specific industry is one of the most important things. And never thinking that, hey, nobody's going to target us, this can't happen to me, because yeah, it's going to happen to you. I hate that one the most too, when people say, we're small, nobody's coming after us. No, because they need places to stage things. Like, this is important for everybody. So more data, more problems, right? This is one of my favorite ones that I found. I'll give you a second to read that one. This is evil versus evil, ways for evil to do evil things. This guy's not active nearly enough on Twitter. Here's where we come to finding the interesting versus the evil versus just the plain stupid. And so I'm going to go through a couple different use cases as I'm coming up on time pretty soon. Actually, anybody know how much time I have left? 10 minutes. All right. Thank you. So this is actually stuff that we found in client environments, relying mostly on Bro, right? Bro is super, super powerful, and I highly recommend you should look into it. If you can only do one thing next week, if you can only study one thing, it's setting up Bro. Do that. So remote access, right? It's conducted using only approved terms. Well, then we have, VNC to and from a prod network, RDP to a domains, log me in, go to my PC. They're legit programs sometimes, but, depending on the environment, that could just be shadow IT, right? So that's a hypothesis that we say, we know this is the fact, when deep down we know we're going to find something contrary to that. Data storage, right? Data is only ever stored at corporately approved locations. Right? Yeah, I hear chuckles. That one always gets a couple chuckles. Stored in unencrypted, infected, external media. Unmanaged source code repositories, for intellectual property are absolutely huge, because we all know that all development is done securely. Maybe. Proxy infrastructure. Make sure it's properly configured. Not blocking no malicious categories. You're just letting everything through. One of the coolest things to kind of stack for when it comes to proxy data is allowed versus denied. We've had clients that had way more allowed than denies. They're just kind of letting everything through and hoping for the best. No categories. I talked a little bit earlier about true source versus true destination, right? I've seen more true destination than true source, and I've seen so many X forward 4 not configured that I want to hang myself. It's just one of those little things that you want to know where it's coming from. Approved protocols, right? We've seen unencrypted telnet, FTP, clear text SMTP, IRC. I've seen a lot of IRC. It's still out there. And it could be something benign, right? It could be some nerd down in the basement that was on like a gaming IRC channel, but you don't actually know that. Like, it just because it says it's a gaming channel. We once took some of the IRC traffic, and one of my colleagues connected to the IRC server, and you just saw bot after bot after bot in like Turkish or some bullshit like that. And like, they swore up and down this was not happening, and that's when you can show them these things. And this is where the hunting use cases really come into play. Internet access is using known and approved client software. No. I've seen out-of-date software client browsers, Flash and Java. One of the easiest wins, search for user agent strings. I've seen custom user agent strings coming from outside, from just other companies that are doing scans on your network, giving you their free pen test, and they'll give you the full results if you buy their services. That shit happens way too often. Privilege management, service accounts, all that stuff up here. I'm going to post all these slides too, because not to go through the whole wall of text. Security architecture, your ASAs don't have scan detection. Probably should. Your sensors are placed where they really shouldn't be. Process execution on your endpoints. I stressed the value of your endpoint logging before. PowerShell execution, Mimikatz, we've literally done searches for Mimikatz, the most basic bitch search you can do, and it was there. And like, hey, that wasn't our red team. They weren't doing that. We don't even have a red team. I was like, okay, well, I think it turned out to be, some guy just testing something, but it was there, plain text, but something they're going to want to know about. DNS, of course, is huge. Everybody knows about DNS. Anything important here? Resolutions to suspicious domains, plus random communications, C2, that kind of thing. So thinking ahead, we want to reduce the attack surface, right? We want to shift our mindsets from finding incidents to finding new ways of finding incidents. Don't bother doing this if you're not going to document it. We hate documentation. Does anybody here love writing documentation? You're lying. I know you're lying. Well, actually, you might not. You might enjoy it. Lessons learned. Loop in your IR, guys. Metrics, again, super important. Time to detect is going to go down, but your instance might go up. That's a really important one to kind of hammer home. So here's something we're trying to kind of get to now from that system one thinking, right? We're intuitive, we're fast, we're doing it based on our knowledge, right? Our muscle memory. And this is kind of where I talked about earlier, like, it doesn't matter how you get there, it's your experience that matters, to kind of moving toward that system two type of thinking. There's a good book, I forget the guy's name, I think it's Daniel Kahneman or something, Thinking Fast and Slow. Great book, I recommend it. And he talks a little bit about this, to being conscious, being slow and deliberate, and actually trying to apply some of that really slow thinking to what you're doing. So now for a show of hands, Jackie did this and I thought it was kind of fun. Has anybody if you've done some kind of hunting in the past, raise your hand. Cool. Keep your hand raised if your current organization has some type of hunting program in place today. Awesome. Raise your hand if your org doesn't have a program, but is thinking about one. That's the reason you're sitting in here. All right, awesome. One more question, and I hope I see some hands for this. How many of you feel like you learned something new? Yes. God, you guys make me feel good. So they're stammering like an idiot. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So just a quick couple resource slides if you guys want to take your pictures real quick, or I'll post them later. This, like I said, the TAP program is awesome. MITRE. Threathunting.net. Check that out. People are contributing to it all the time to really help you along on those use cases. Logly Security Onion. And then look up Bro. A couple cool blogs. Jack Crook, awesome for hunting. Like, he's the man. Elasticsearch. And then an article about that book I mentioned of Thinking Fast and Slow. And probably my most important slide is I want to leave you with at least a few of the following points. Building a program is hard. This shit's not easy. You're going to run into a lot of politics. You're going to run into a lot of roadblocks. But building a capability is a little less hard because you can do this stuff for free. The tools and the knowledge are out there. Context is king. Silos are going to kill you. Share early, share often. It's the only way you're going to get anywhere. And not related, but kind of while you're here, meet somebody new. Talk to people. Strike up a conversation. That's what this thing is all about. I love that BSides is here this year. And at the same time, like, shit's weird. Be kind to one another, right? Like, everybody's having a hard time, a lot of time lately. Work is hard, life's harder. Give as many hugs as you want. Jason says it's okay. That's it.